In the first half of the 20th century, it wasn't uncommon for towns to develop around textile mills. That's what happened in the foothills community of Elkin, North Carolina, thanks to a family and a company called Chatham.
Chatham to me was the guiding force for this community.
There's nothing about it that I didn't enjoy.
The area would really have been lost if we hadn't had Chatham.
There's never been anybody that loved their employees and looked after them like Chatham did.
You know, the people that worked at that company, I think they felt like it was their company.
I've had people still tell me that they felt like a part of the family.
Its legal name was the Chatham Manufacturing Company, but the first hint about the closeness employees felt to the company was how they referred to it.
Everyone worked at the mill, or as it was also called, everybody worked at Chatham's. I think what they were saying was Mr. Chatham's Manufacturing Company or Mr. Chatham's Blanket Mill.
Wool blankets were what they first made at Chatham, starting in 1877. Alexander Chatham and his brother-in-law Thomas Lenore Gwynn were Civil War veterans for the Confederacy. Together they purchased a grist mill about a mile north of Elkin on Big Elkin Creek. The mill had previously bartered for wool to supply its wool carding business, so they decided to call it the Elkin Valley Woolen Mill.
In 1878, they went to Pennsylvania and purchased spinning equipment, weaving equipment, and so forth, and also met a gentleman named Gil Van T Ruth, who was an engineer by profession.
He was a very good engineer, and so he was the one that kept the plant running and let the Chathams do the selling part of it.
12 years later, and now with Ruth at the helm of the manufacturing process, Alexander Chatham purchased Thomas Gwynn's interest in the mill in 1890. It was reorganized as the Chatham Manufacturing Company. That same year, Mr. Chatham's son, Hugh Gwynn Chatham, succeeded his father as president. 3 years later, a larger and more modern mill was built east of Elkin along the tracks to take advantage of the railroad that had come to town. All systems were go to get their blankets out to the rest of the country.
Oh yeah, blankets was what we were known for. It was the only product that we produced that had our own name on it.
Chatham began producing flannel, other wool fabrics, even jean material, and since some of the Chathams were living in Winston at the time, a finishing plant for the burgeoning company was built there in 1907. But in 1916, Chatham would face the first of many tests when floodwaters ravaged all of northwestern North Carolina, including their new plant, which was built next to the Yadkin River.
One thing that the folks of Elkin feared was, because there was a plant already in Winston-Salem, that Hugh Chatham might decide to not rebuild in Elkin. But he was from here and he was devoted to the people of this community and he loved Elkin, so he rebuilt the mill on higher ground and it continued to thrive and grow.
Hugh Chatham wasn't only significant to the history of the mill, but to the state in general. He was a North Carolina state senator, a philanthropist, and extremely well thought of by the citizens of Elkin. So much so, after he died in 1929, the Hugh Chatham Memorial Bridge was named in his honor, as well as the Hugh Chatham Hospital on Hawthorne Road. Even with his passing, the company remained in good hands.
His son, Richard Thurman Chatham, took over as president of the company and led the company through the 1950s.
Thurman was a veteran of both World Wars and a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. But at Chatham, he is remembered for something much more personal.
He was best known there to me as being able to remember everybody's name.
And it was that personal commitment that paved the way for Chatham to continue operating through the Great Depression. Employees did not lose their jobs. And when Elkin National Bank closed its doors in 1933 and people couldn't get their money, the mill was there to help.
The Elkin Merchants Association created some script that could be used that was backed by the Chatham payroll so that the folks in Elkin could go to the stores and businesses downtown, get the products that they needed, and they could cash their checks from the mill and get the change back in the script. And so when the banks reopened, they could get the monies that they needed to function.
The Chathams would also make sure the town of Elkin received another product it needed, unrelated to textiles. Earlier in 1927, Thurman Chatham bought several thousand acres of land in North Elkin and called it Klondike Farm.
The family lore has it that it got its name because after he bought the land, he took his father out to look at it, and his father sort of kicked the ground and after looking around and said, "Well, son, I certainly hope there's gold under there because there's not much else here." It was just totally undeveloped scrub. And so my grandfather named it Klondike, hoping because of the reference to the gold.
Gold was never discovered, but it was prime land for a dairy farm that provided milk for the town through the 1960s.
It had buttermilk, chocolate milk, whole milk.
We would get our milk delivered by the milk delivery man, and the man would get out with his glass milk bottles, clinking in his little metal carrier, and he would walk around to the side porch of the house and deliver the milk.
Cabins on the property were eventually renovated into guest quarters for visiting clients and dignitaries. Starting in the 1930s, their arrival, as well as other interesting bits of mill and employee news, was often published in the company newsletter, the Chatham Blanketeer.
It was a handy little paper for everybody.
It really created a community within the company with news of business items, but also it told the story of the workers' personal lives.
It had recipes in it, the birth of a child, the death of a family member. It was truly a thing that brought us all together.
Production was humming right along, so much so in 1936, Chatham Manufacturing Company entered the world of automotive upholstery, first for the Packard Motor Company.
Originally the plant was producing automobile upholstery because everything inside a car in the early days was wool. That's the only product they had. Didn't have synthetics until after the Second World War. Headlining, door panels, and seats.
Textile production was up, employees were happy, and Elkin was perfectly suited to become the company town Chatham was helping create. There were also other complementary businesses that helped the town thrive, a furniture factory and a commercial district that rose up to serve citizens. But the decade of the 40s brought with it a whole slew of challenges.
Not only did we suffer from the 1940 flood, which devastated northwestern North Carolina, but the old mill that was built in 1893 down below the railroad tracks burned in 1940.
But news that the finishing plant would move to Elkin that same year created a silver lining to the black clouds fire and flood had brought to Chatham, and along with the plant came hundreds of employees and new families to town.
That's one of the great decisions that benefited this community.
I think they decided that having everything located in one spot made a lot more sense from a manufacturing standpoint.
Moving the finishing plant to Elkin not only increased the population, it made Chatham a fully integrated facility.
Chatham was unusual in the textile industry. It did everything from start to finish, from bringing in the raw wool, cleaning it, spinning it into yarn, and producing fabric from it. And then from the fabric, they had to finish it. Most of the time, textile companies had spinning in one plant, weaving in another plant, finishing in another plant, shipping from another location. We did everything here.
Thurman Chatham's connection with the Navy made the mill the perfect choice to provide specific needs for the military during World War II.
They had a lot of wartime contracts. They literally made millions of blankets for all branches of the armed services. Fred Norman tells a story when he was in Patton's army in the Battle of Bastogne, and when it was so cold and they were on that forced march, he was driving his tank, And at night they would stop and dig these foxholes in the cold. And he talks about a truck coming along, throwing off these blankets to these guys. And he picks one up and it's got a Chatham manufacturing tag on it. He says, "Look here guys, this is a piece of home."
Many young men from Elkin left to serve their country, and a large number of them had jobs at Chatham. So when they left, the ladies of Elkin stepped up.
The women took over and run the mill.
What exactly did you do?
I folded blankets.
In the 1930s and 40s, women at Chatham proudly wore neat blue uniforms with crisp white aprons. Thanks to the many sports teams Chatham sponsored, some of those ladies also wore basketball uniforms. Near the end of World War II, Albert Butler became the first non-family member to hold the position of president of the mill, and one aspect he enthusiastically supported was those teams. The first was men's baseball, the Chatham Blanketeers, which started in 1929 and rose through the ranks to a semi-professional team by 1948.
A lot of mills had their own basketball teams and baseball teams. And the basketball teams had men and women basketball teams. They played people like Haynes Hosiery and all of those people from a wide area, 3 or 4 states. And they would recruit people to come into their plant to work who were experts in those areas.
It created leisure enthusiasm among the town. They were very proud of the teams and how well they did.
The ladies' basketball team, the Chatham Blankettes, achieved their own level of success and was often compared to the men's team.
He wanted to know if they was as good as the ladies' team was in Chatham.
Well, I don't think so. They were good, but they didn't know. I don't. They had the reputation that the women did. When Haynes Hosiery and Chatham played, it was like when Carolina Duke plays today. The gym was full.
On one occasion, the Blankettes made it to the National AAU Championship in St. Joseph, Missouri, and Chatham Manufacturing rented a rail car to take them there and back.
Well, we was getting ready to pull out of Elkin in our Pullman. Mr. Butler got on and he said, "Now, we're going to the national tournament." So I decided I'd give you a little surprise. He pulled out a roll of money and handed each one of us a $100 bill. I'd never seen a $100 bill. So we done our shopping. That's the kind of company they were.
Chatham did a lot for their employees as far as social activities. There were various clubs that they created.
And I'll tell you something else we had. We had a Chatham choir. We were very good. We were very good.
To house some of their sports teams and clubs, as well as provide a social center for the town, Chatham constructed a magnificent YMCA beside the mill in 1942.
That was named in memory of the late Gil Van T Ruth, who was the first superintendent of Chatham Manufacturing.
Oh, now that was a super place. We came alive with that.
Their goal was to have the nicest YMCA in America.
Unheard of. You had an Olympic-sized swimming pool, both kinds of bowling, 10 pins, duck pins, pool tables. They had a basketball arena that seated 2,400 people back in that day. And we loved to get some of the other people down there because we could run them to death.
It was also used as a banquet hall. The library was first in that building.
And downstairs was a cafeteria that made the best fried apple pies you could ever have.
It was really the center of community activity for many, many years. It operated until 1973.
That was as much of the plant as anything was. It was great.
By 1955, Thurman Chatham stepped down as president, giving way for his son, Hugh Gwynn Chatham II, to assume the role. Chatham had helped create what many called an idyllic community. In 1961, Elkin even revived a slogan from the 1920s, "Best Little Town in North Carolina." But only those who have lived in a town occupied by a factory or mill can truly appreciate the presence those companies create.
The night was soft and dark, and you would hear the cicadas singing and the katydids singing at night, and in the background was the clickety-clack of all the looms.
That sound was coming from W3 looms.
We had shuttles going across the loom and hitting at the other end. A lot of noise.
Clang-de, clang, clang-de, clang-de.
But far away during the night, it was a really pleasant, reassuring, and safe sound that all was well.
It was a wonderful, beautiful sound. Things are working, you know, the plant's running.
Any kind of absence of sound meant something wasn't quite right.
And it was home.
Home, as referred to Elkin, was growing. Chatham employed 3,500 people by the 1960s. At the request of Hugh Chatham II, Alexander Smith invented the non-woven process for making blankets, called fiber woven.
They'd gone to school together. Zan was teaching at MIT, and so he talked to him and said, how about coming back to Elkin, your hometown, and develop a way for us to make blankets faster, cheaper, quicker, and better, that sort of thing.
Fiber woven technology revolutionized the textile industry and strengthened Chatham manufacturing even more. Other than providing steady jobs, Chatham's success was also positive for the town. With the mill's vast water and power usage, the infrastructure of Elkin was updated. Entire neighborhoods sprang up when Chatham employees moved in, and superior performing schools were a source of pride and a way to attract those highly educated employees. It was a win-win situation for everyone, and the 1970s saw continued growth and success.
We were very outstanding, and that was known across the United States. We had offices across the country. One of the main offices, of course, was in New York.
Leadership at the mill changed again in 1970 when Richard Thurman Chatham Jr., or Dick as he preferred, became president.
Dick thrived. He loved it. He loved the mill. He loved the people in Elkin.
But the secret to their success had never changed.
Chatham knew not to put all its eggs in one basket.
A system was developed whereby if demand for car upholstery was down, furniture upholstery would be substituted in. If demand for new furniture was down, furniture upholsterers were reupholstering people's furniture.
As a result, Chatham manufacturing had grown from one textile mill in 1890 to 120 acres and a 2 million square foot complex just 87 years later in 1977. The mill was now publicly traded on the stock market. But could the company survive what fate had in store for it in the 1980s?
In 1987, Chatham reported a profit of $6.25 million with a total sales of $125 million.
We were moving forward. Things were going well. The economy was good. The company was definitely making money. We had a lot of cash on our balance sheet. We knew that this was a dangerous place to be.
Well, in retrospect, we probably had too good a year in '87. It got some people to looking at us.
When Northern Feather came along, they asked for a meeting with me in New York, indicated that they would like to buy the company. I indicated the company was not for sale, but we appreciated their interest. Several months later, they came along with a hostile takeover.
And entered into a bidding war. We had management here trying to buy it also, after they made their initial offer. They outbid us. We got to the point where we knew we couldn't bid any higher and still make money on it.
And as it turned out, that was the death of the company in effect.
So this was a real shock for the town when it was a homegrown mill. It was local, it was the community, and all of a sudden it had an owner who was across the ocean in another country.
The Chatham Manufacturing Company, as the townspeople had known it, as its employees had known it, as their customers had known it, was no more. And to make matters worse, the Danish company who had just purchased it, Northern Feather, wasn't the company it presented itself to be.
Northern Feather actually wasn't that strong a company and had some fraudulent business practices that were going on probably when they acquired Chatham Manufacturing Company. And in 1998, Northern Feather declared bankruptcy.
It was sold out to CMI, And from there, the blanket division was sold off to one company, the upholstery division was sold off to another company, and it's just been split and divided and dwindled down to nothing.
Today, much of the complex that was the heartbeat of Chatham lies in ruins, a mere skeleton of the power of industry it once was.
It makes you sick, it really does.
We miss it, the people, those of us who work there.
When I grew up, I felt that I didn't want to do anything but come back and raise a family and work at Chatham. That's not going to be there. I just got to realize that time goes on and things will be different.
It makes me obviously very sad because I think the company had huge potential. I always hate seeing lost potential, and it was a whole era. It was good for the area, it was good for the community.
And while Chatham was known as a strong employer and producer of textiles, it was what went on outside those realms that really defined its character.
Chatham did a lot of things that most people did not know. For example, when the town lost money or needed money, they provided the money. When the hospital lost money, as they usually did back in those days, they paid it.
Literally, if your church needed pews, if our fire department needed something, you went to see Dick Chatham and he'd write a check. They took care of it.
You know, you can go back to the library, you can go back to the airport, you can go back to all the things that makes Elkin a great place to live.
It's got great schools. It's got a fabulous, which I like, golf course, and it's due to the Chatham being there.
There may never be an employer as large as Chatham and Elkin again, although it's been gone for decades and the physical reminders of the mill are slowly becoming piles of brick and metal to be reused in other ways and other places. The memory of the people of Chatham and their incredible work ethic still lives on in the generations that came after and are charged with the awesome responsibility of continuing to make Elkin one of the best little towns in North Carolina.
The spirit of Chatham is still here and will be here for a long time.
I'm proud of Elkin though, in this whole area. It's worked hard to reinvent itself. You look at what's going on with the Reeves Theater, with all the wineries in the area, with all the agritourism that's going on, tourism in general.
I think for the future, what will be our strength is for us to be diverse in our economic base.
Things different from textiles. You know, we got the PGW plant here, which has been a big thing.
I think the environment is very crucial.
We've got to find other ways that the community can band together like they did at Chatham.
I wouldn't want to live anywhere else than right here.